Okay, I'm live, just waiting for people to join. I can get rid of my keyboard for now. Better put my specs on so I can see. Now, I might need my tech guru, my son Ollie, to come and have a look when people join. Is this just me over here?
Yeah, that's yourself.
That's me.
Because that's your chat.
My chat. Okay, so when anybody arrives, they can
That
start
number will go up.
chatting amongst themselves. Yep, okay.
They can chat if they've got an account.
I understand that, Tom. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just waiting for people to arrive. While I'm waiting, I'll just make sure that I've got everything set up. I've got somebody there, but I can't see who. I've got somebody, hello, whoever it is. You can chat in the chat section, or you can put something in the comments, I think. This is the first time I've done it, so bear with me. I've got my tech guru, my son, Ollie, helping me. It's quite strange talking to a screen. But we're still in lockdown here in Melbourne, but we had some great news today and we're opening up again, so that's awesome. Can get back to face-to-face classes. So I'll just wait a couple more minutes and I'll get started. So hopefully you've downloaded your pattern, your Soho sweater, printed it off and cut out your fabric for the sew along today. But if you're just here to watch, that's fine. You can always replay it later on. And hopefully I can teach you a few tips and tricks along the way that will help with your sewing. And then we've got another person joining. Now I've got my glasses on, Joel and Jessica. So hi. Where are you from, Joel and Jessica? There we go. So I might just get started. I'll give it a couple more minutes, maybe just a couple more minutes, and we can get started. Hopefully you've got your sewing machine ready. I've got my overlocker here and a sewing machine because you can sew this Soho sweater with either the overlocker or your sewing machine, or you can combine both, which I do. So make sure that you've got that threaded up, ready to go. I always test my on the overlocker to start with because of the differential feed. So if you're using an overlocker and you don't know what the differential feed is, it's usually not a handle, what do you call that? Hand wheel at the bottom that you can change the speed of, or not the bottom, mine's the second one here. Yours might be on the bottom, that you can change the speed of the feed dogs. So usually with stretch fabric, you go higher in the number, and with lighter weight fabrics like chiffon, you go lower. So I've already tested mine out. It does depend on the stretch of the fabric too. Sometimes I find it goes the opposite way. So I've tested mine out and I've got mine on 1.5, and I'm going to have my sewing machine stitch length, on zigzag, and I'm going to have the stitch width on 1.5 and the stitch length on 2.5. So that is just a little zigzag, and it's great for sewing stretch with. If you sew stretch with a straight stitch, it's going to end up cracking when you put it over your head. So make sure you sew with a zigzag if you're only using your regular machine. Okay, so to get started, hopefully you've cut out all your pieces. So you should have in your ribbing, you should have your neckband, your hemband, and your 2 lower sleeve cuffs. Actually, I should show you the sweater. So this is the Soho sweater that I've got on. I've made a few to show you. So this was my first sample. So you can see the neckline's not exactly the way I wanted it. I would have liked that a little bit tighter, but I just made this as a sample, so I didn't bother sort of fixing that up, but I still wear it a lot and I love it. And I've got a pink one here, which is really cute, and a black one. I wear that one all the time. So black is great, especially if you live in Melbourne. And this one here, I've done in a baby blue. And I wasn't really happy with the contrast colour of the neckband and the sleeves, the lower sleeve. So I chopped them off and just put a little bit of elastic in the sleeve and just put a little bit of binding on the neckband. And it actually, for a little spring top, it's really cute. I love it. All right, so there's a lot of variations you could do with this pattern. You could also, if you don't like the puffiness of the sleeves, like if you think it's a little bit too much, you could actually cut and slash your pattern piece of the sleeve and just draw it in a little bit and then sticky tape it up, and you won't have as much gathering there. But I love the gathers. Anyway, back to the ribbon. So I hope you've got that all cut out. So you have your neckband, your lower sleeve, and your hemband. And then you'll have a front, a back piece, and 2 sleeves. Okay, so I'll get started. And also test your needle. If you haven't tested your needle, I've actually got a regular needle in here because we're in lockdown and I didn't have a stretch needle or a jersey needle. So I tested it and it works fine. So that's great. So make sure you test your needle if you have to. All right. And we're going to start with the back piece. So grab out your back piece. And I'll put my instructions over here. Now, my Wi-Fi, I hope that it's okay, the connection here. If it does drop out at any stage, you can always refresh and I'll go and fix that up. I'll go on somebody else's network if it drops out. All right, so with the back pieces, we need to interface the shoulder seams. So you need to cut out 2 pieces of interfacing, measuring 1.5 centimetres wide, so that's the width of it, and the length of your shoulder seam. So it will look like this. And we're going to interface just the back shoulder seams. And the reason we do that is because stretch fabric tends to stretch out over the shoulder seams like that if you don't interface or use binding or something like that. So you can use lots of different things to stabilize the shoulder seam. But I find with this sweater, because French terry is quite stable already, that the interfacing is fine. So I'm going to just now this is the first time I've done this, so bear with me. I've tried to sort everything out here so that I've got space. So I'm going to show you me interfacing this, ironing on this, interfacing to the back shoulder there. I was lucky at home, I had some grey interfacing, so it matches my dark grey fabric. Oh, and speaking of fabric, a French terry is suitable for this Soho sweater, but again, because we're in lockdown, all I could find was this sweater knit, which is like a brushed fleece. So this will work okay too, but because it's very lightweight, so you don't want to use a really heavyweight brush fleece on this. I think the gathers would just get too thick, but if it's lightweight, it'll be fine. So I've popped my interfacing on the back shoulder there, and I'm going to use a press cloth. So I've got the sticky side down, hopefully. If you're not sure the sticky side, if it's not shiny, it's usually bumpy, so you can feel the bumps underneath. And then I'm going to put a press cloth on top. I've just got a bit of calico there because we don't want to get interfacing on our iron. I've done that a few times before in the past, and it's not fun. So you just need to hold the iron on top for about 10 seconds and try not to sort of swirl your iron around like this because it tends to move the interfacing. So just hold it down. You might give it a little bit of steam, and then you take that off and have a look. Yep, and that's stuck okay. So I'll do the other one now. All right. The weather here in Melbourne today is shocking. Which is a great sewing day. Raining outside, windy. Just trying to feel for that bumpy side. There we go. That's the bumpy side. And you can see my interfacing, it's just a tiny bit longer than the shoulder seam there. That doesn't matter. I'm going to iron it on anyway, and then I can just cut a little bit off after. Okay, so holding that iron down for about 10 seconds. So I think this is the first time I've done this, but you can chat amongst yourselves in the chat. And if you want to ask a question, go ahead. I can see my screen, so hopefully I can see it. There we go. And that one's stuck on too, I think. Oh, that one didn't stick very well. I might have to do that again. Give that another go. Another thing too, you should really always test your interfacing with your fabric. Sometimes some interfacing won't stick very well on particular types of fabric. I think my iron's just having a bit of an issue though. It's waiting to heat up again, so it's not very hot. Yeah, it doesn't feel very hot. That's okay. It's definitely turned on. We'll give it another blast. I'll wait for that to heat up a little bit more. All right, so that's done. So hopefully you've got your interfacing on now too. Oh, there's my interfacing left behind. It didn't stick at all. We'll try that one again. My iron has definitely had a little meltdown. Try that again. I've been having issues with this iron. It's brand new iron too. It doesn't seem to want to heat up. All right, if that's not going to heat up, we'll come back to that later. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is grab your front piece. Okay, which looks like not that. That's the sleeves. Here's the front piece here. And we're going to go right sides together. So there's the right side of your front. And then you're matching the back shoulder seams. I'll pop that out of the way so you can see. With your right sides together. Now, my interfacing is just not sticking on because my iron's decided to have a meltdown. I think it actually needs, descaling the water. So I might have to just leave that for a second. Okay, so I've got the back shoulder matching the front shoulder. Oops, I better turn my phone off. And I'm going to pin those together. Now the seam allowance for this Soho sweater is 1 centimetre. And the reason it's 1 centimetre is because it's easier to sew on an overlocker with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Okay, so that's one shoulder seam together. And if you are sewing on the overlocker, make sure that you take your pins out well in advance before you sew. You do not want a pin getting caught up in your overlocker. Well, number one, it's not great for your machine, but most importantly, you can break the needle and then, get it in your eye. So not a good thing. So there we go. I've got my front and back shoulder seams pinned together. See that? And I'm now going to sew them. So if you're sewing on your regular machine, 1 centimetre seam allowance, use a zigzag stitch. If you've joined and you missed that earlier, zigzag stitch, make sure that it's 1.5 wide and 2.5 in length. Okay, but I'm using my overlocker, so here we go. I've already tested my overlocker and it seems to be working okay. So they're the famous last words. All right, so I'm using 1 centimetre seam allowance, take that pin out. I find too with the overlocker, if you grab the chain of thread to get it started, it helps a lot. Okay, so that's one seam done. And now I'm going to flip over and do the other one. Take the pin out. Grab that chain and I just start by pulling it a little bit. There we go. It really gets it going, especially if you've got bulky fabric. Now the next step is to press those seam allowances towards the back. Now my iron is having a meltdown because it needs descaling, which means I need to take the water out from this little area here. So I'm not going to bother doing that just to save you a bit of time. I'm just going to pretend that I'm ironing. So, but you can go and iron. So press those seams towards the back. And I always like to chop off my little overlocker threads as I go. Otherwise they just get in the way and they get caught up in the stitching. We're going to have intersecting seams, so you can just chop them off. It doesn't matter. All right. Okay, so now we're up to the neckband. I'm just looking for my bin. There it is. Okay, so we're up to the neckband. Once you've pressed your seams towards the back. Okay, so with the neckband, in the instructions, I have told you you can overlock it or you can sew it on your regular machine. Now, after sewing a few of these, I've decided I like it with my regular machine better because you can press the seam open. So with the overlocker, with the seams together, it gets a little bit bulky in the neckband. So I prefer now just to sew this with a regular machine. So with the right sides together, here's the neckband, you're going to sew those short ends together. But actually, before we do that, I almost missed a very important step. I like to measure my neckline and my neckband stretch to get a perfect fitting neckband. So I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so your pattern will come with your regular size neckband, like from size 6 to 20 or whatever it is, and you'll cut that out. But a lot of the times your fabric might be a little bit stretchier or not as stretchy as the pattern was designed for. So I'll show you a way of figuring out how to get the perfect fitting neckband. So you've got your front and back sewn together at the shoulder seams. Find your centre back and your centre front by just dividing it in half like that. And then match up your shoulder seams. So I pin it at the shoulder seams there. Okay, and there's my centre back. And I put a pin there too. And then I put a pin at the centre front, just in case things move. There we go. All right, so there we go. I don't know if you can see that. So I've got the centre front, centre back, and my shoulder seams are lined up. Now, I'll put that out of the way so you can see that. I'm going to measure my neckline using a measuring tape. I want to, there you go, see that? Yep. I want to measure it on the stitching line, so not on the edge of the neckline. So the seam allowance is 1 centimetre. So I'm going to measure in 1 centimetre. Now, because I've been sewing for a little while, I can eyeball 1 centimetre. But if you're just starting out, you might want to measure in, and you could draw it with chalk even, that 1 centimetre seam allowance. But I'm going to use my measuring tape, and I'm going to measure around from the centre front all the way around to the centre back. Here we go. And that is measuring 26 centimetres. So that's half a neckband. So 26 times 2, now I have to get my thinking cap on here, 26, 40, 52 centimetres. Is that right? That's 26 times 2. I better get my calculator out anyway, because I've got a few things to do here. So I've got 26 times 2 equals 52. Yes. All right. So my neckband is 52 centimetres. I probably should write that down, but that's okay. My neckline, sorry, not my neckband. Now, I'm going to figure out how stretchy my neckband is. So I grab 10 centimetres of the fabric. So I'll just use the measuring tape here. So there's 10 centimetres. So I'm going to grab 10 centimetres of the fabric, and I'm going to stretch it and see how far it stretches. And this stretches a lot. It's almost 75%. I've got a great little chart that a girl that used to work for me, Mel, she's got a website, Wearable Patterns, and she came up with this fabric chart, fabric stretch chart, and it's really good. So if you go to her website, I'll put a link in later on. she's got the stretch chart there. I'll get it up a bit closer if you can see. So if you grab your 10 centimetres of fabric and stretch it to that point, that means it's got at least 20% of stretch in the fabric. To that point, it's got 25. So it's a really easy way of doing it. Mine, I'm pretty sure it's got 75. I'm going to check with her little chart. Yeah, mine's got 75 stretch, or maybe a little bit less. Try that again. Maybe I'll go with 50% instead. So if it's got 50% stretch, it says here to remove 10 to 15% of the total length of your neckline. So my neckline was 52 centimetres, so I'm minus, let's go with 15%. 15%, that means 44.2 centimetres is my neckband length plus seam allowance, so plus 2 centimetres. So my neckband length should be 46.2. So if I measure mine, the one that I've cut out from the pattern, it's measuring a bit more. It's measuring 50 centimetres. So I might want to take some off. I might just double check my calculations again. So I've got 52 centimetres minus, say if I go with 10% instead of 15, 10% equals 46.8 plus 2 centimetres. And I'm saying 2 centimetres because it's 1 centimetre seam allowance on each end of the neckband. That gives me 48, or that's closer to what this pattern is, 48.8. It is spot on, actually. So I might just leave the neckband and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so it's pretty close, but we're going to base this in anyway. So if it's not quite right, we can always take it out. Anyway, that was a lot of information about maths. So I'll leave a link later on with the link to Mel's stretch chart. Okay, so here's your neckband, and I've got it right sides together, and I'm going to stitch with a 1 centimetre seam allowance the short ends, so down here. Okay, I'm going to use my regular sewing machine to do this. All right, and I've got it on zigzag. No, I don't, so I need to go and pop it up to zigzag, which is on 7 on this machine. 1.5 and 2.5 length. All right. Back stitch. All right. So I've sewn the short ends together. I'll just trim off those threads. So I like to trim off my threads as I go. Now, if you've got an iron that is working, you can press that seam open. You could trim off a little bit, maybe, but 1 centimetre seam allowance doesn't leave you much. So if you trim off, be careful not to trim off too much. I might even just trim the tiniest little bit off there, but not too much. Otherwise it ends up really bulky. All right, there we go, that's better. So I'll just show you. So I've just sewn that together, and then you're going to press that open. I might recheck my iron. Okay, no. So I'm just going to leave that there for now. Then the next step, I really do need my iron going, because we're going to press the wrong sides together now. So there's your neckband looking like that. And now wrong sides together. You're going to fold the neckband in half lengthwise like that. And we are going to press that. So if you can just bear with me for a second, I'm just going to go and empty my iron because I really want that iron working. It just needs a bit of emptying through here. These irons, when they have the decal option, you need to empty them every now and then. And I'm very lucky because I've got my laundry just here, so I can just do it through here. Oh, there wasn't much water in that at all. All right. So there wasn't a lot of water in that. So that's interesting that it was not not working. Okay. Sorry. Plugging that back in. There we go. All right, hopefully that starts to heat up again. Put it on those two. Okay, so that's giving you time. Anyway, I'll press your neckband together. Oh, I can hear it working now. That's great. So I'll just get my ironing board out again. Okay. Now pressing, if you're fairly new to sewing, pressing is like 80% of sewing, if not more. You need to press often, every time you sew a seam basically, for a really professional finish. If you don't press, it can start to look homemade. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We almost want it to look homemade. Now this fabric is a little bit lightweight, so it's a little bit hard to press. Here we go. Be careful of your fingers when you're pressing little things like this. There we go, that's better. Okay. Right, iron is working again. Thank goodness. All right, so I've pressed that together. Okay. And there. Okay. Now that we've done that, we need to find the quarter points on the neckband. So you've got your seam there. So I'm going to pop a pin where the seam is. That's going to be my centre back. So I'm going to divide that in half and I'll find my centre front and I'll pop a pin there. That's the centre front. Then I'm going to fold it again to find those quarter points. And a lot of people think that this is where the shoulder points are, but it's not. It sits just in front of the shoulder point at this point, because your front neck is a little bit longer because it dips down a bit than the back neck. All right, there we go. So I've got my quarter points pinned, if you can see that. All right. And then I need to find the quarter points on my garment. So I've already got centre front and centre back there. So now what I do is fold that in half again. And I mark the quarter points here. And this is where you'll see that it's sitting just in front of the shoulder seam on the front. That's where the quarter point should be. And I'll pop pins in there. So now open that up and show you. Oh, I've lost a pin. There it is. Oh, lost it again. There we go. So you can see the quarter points. There's the shoulder seam, and the quarter points sit just in front of the shoulder seam. So you've got your centre back, centre front. So I'll open it up like that. You might be able to see it a little bit better. It's a bit hard to see really, isn't it? All right. Oh, I think I've lost a pin again. That's okay. I can line that up again. In fact, oh no, there's the pin there. It's just on the other side. All right. So there we are, quarter points. Okay. Now we're going to get a neckband, right sides together. So I'm going to find my centre back, which is where the seam is. And I'm going to pin the centre back seam of the neckband to the centre back of the bodice. That's my starting point. Then I like to go to the centre front. So centre front, where you've marked that on your neckband, match that up with the centre front of the front bodice. pin that in place. Then we're going to match those quarter points. So you've got your quarter point on the neckband. You're going to match that with the quarter point on your bodice. And I'm just doing a bit of a rough job here. I'm going to fix it up in a minute. I just want to get them matched up to start with. And then the other side. Okay, take those pins out. So I've got all my quarter points matched up. Now I can go and stretch to fit. So stretch the neckband to fit the neckline. And this is where I can tell just from experience whether I've got enough stretch in my neckband or not, or too much stretch. Because you should have about 10% stretch in your neckband. And mine's feeling a little bit floppy. I think I'm going to have to actually shorten my neckband. So if I'm stretching, yeah, I'm stretching. I'm not getting a lot of difference between the neckband and the neckline. So I'm going to unpin that and do it again. I'm going to take a couple of centimetres off. So I think my calculations were right in the first place. So I am going to get my neckband and I'm just going to take a couple of centimetres off because I think my calculations, my first calculation, there was a few centimetres difference. So I probably should have gone with that one to start with, but that's okay. I'll just quickly take a few centimetres off here. All right, and I'll trim that off. All right, I'm just going to finger press open my seam there just to save a little bit of time. Okay, pin that back together. Now, I did forget to mention in the beginning that I'll probably go for an hour today. So we're almost halfway through, isn't that terrible? So you can at least get your neckband and your sleeve in, which are the most important parts of this. And then I'll come back next week and finish it off. All right, so now I'm going to do that again, find my centre front, centre back, quarter points. Sewing requires a lot of patience. You learn patience through sewing. Okay, and then I'm just going back again. Okay, ouch. Matching up the centre back, centre front. The quarter points. The other quarter point. And now we're back to where we started. So now I'm going to stretch again. Yeah, that's a bit better. I can feel more stretch in there now. So you need about 10% difference between the neckband and the neckline. So that's feeling about right to me. So now you're just going to go and pin that neckband in. Now I like to use my pins perpendicular at this point on a neckline. It's much easier when it comes to sewing to take the pins out as you go, and things don't tend to move as much. And use lots of pins is my little tip here. Lots of pins hold it in place. Okay, another one. I think the neckband of mine, the fabric is very, very loose, as in it's not, I don't think it's a good quality fabric. It feels like it hasn't got a lot of recovery in it. All right, but I'm going to keep sewing along anyway. Okay, so there you go. I've got my neckband pinned on to the neckline. Now, I always say before you just go and sew it on, baste it in place to start with. So with a long, straight machine stitch. So I'm going to put my stitch on straight. Oops, there we go. And the longest stitch you've got on your machine, because we want to test this first before we actually go and sew it in properly. Okay. So start at your centre back. I like to start there because if that's you know, with the least conspicuous place, I suppose I'm trying to say, if you've got back stitching or anything like that. Okay, 1 centimetre seam allowance. So when I baste it in, I'm just shy of the 1 centimetre seam allowance, so probably at about 9 millimetres. And you're going to stretch the neckband slightly as you sew. And stop every, 3 or 4 centimetres and double check everything to make sure you're not catching anything underneath. So you don't have to sew in one long continuous line. Stop with your needle down, press a foot up, readjust things. Now, I'll try not to poke my tongue out as I sew. I quite often find myself poking my tongue out while I'm sewing. So, Jess, I hope that you're sewing along okay. If you've got any questions, make sure you ask. I've got a feeling my neckband's going to be slightly loose, but for the sake of this sew along, I'm just going to go with it. It's all about learning the techniques, really, with this sew along. So hopefully your calculations on your neckband are okay. But just remembering that 10% rule when you're stretching, it should feel like about 10%. Now don't backstitch because we might have to pull this out. So this is a temporary basting stitch. And the reason I do this is so that I can then try it on and see what the neckline looks like. Now my ribbing too is slightly contrast colour because, like I said, we've been locked down. So I just had to go with whatever I had in the stash. So I am going to, hopefully, what have I got underneath? Oh yeah, I've got a tank top, that's okay. I'm going to just try this on and have a look at the neckline because I just want to show you what it's supposed to look like. Sorry, I've got half my bra hanging out there. Okay. My head. So let's have a look. It's hard for me to see, isn't it? Oh, that's really hard to see. I might just use my camera as a mirror if that's all right. Let's have a look. Camera. Here we go. So I can see better. Oh, that's better. It's not too bad. I reckon I could have, taken just a little bit extra out. So if I was sewing this without sort of time constraints, I'll rip that basting out and I would just shave off. I feel like it needs about another centimetre off the neckband and then it will sit nice and snug against my neck. But it's not too bad actually. It's acceptable, but I think you could make it just a little bit better. So that's great. I'll get dressed again. So try yours on and if you need to adjust that, then you can adjust. But like I said, this is about learning the techniques. I always say the first time you sew something, think of it as a wearable toile. So a toile or something, we make up to test the fit. And then make your adjustments after and perfect it in the next couple of things that you sew. All right, so now we've got the neckband in. So now we're going to have to top stitch this. Oh, sorry, sew it in properly. Sew it in properly first. So now you're happy with the fit. So now you can go and sew it in properly. So I've got my overlocker here. So I'm just going to overlock around the on top of that basting stitch. I'm not even going to pull the basting stitches out. I'll just go over the top of it. Oops. And again, with the overlocker, make sure you're always looking underneath. Make sure you haven't got any fabric caught up. I've had a few people in my classes. So beautiful garments. And they've almost got to the end. They've gone to the overlocker to do something, and then they've found that they've cut something underneath. Very frustrating. So I've got a little bit of thread caught in there for them, because, you know, all that time and effort put into it. Not to mention the money, because fabric is not cheap these days. Alright, so I've sewn my neckband. Then I'm going to press the seam allowance down towards the body. So I'll grab my iron out again. Trim off any loose threads. Grab the iron, hopefully it's working. And just give it a little bit of a press down towards the bodice, because we're going to top stitch this seam from the right side in a second. Time goes fast. 41 minutes gone already. Put the neckband in. Okay. There we go. So that's the neckband sewn in and pressed down, seam allowance pressed down. So now we need to top stitch. Now, if you've got a twin needle, you can use a twin needle. I'm just going to zigzag today because I find the zigzag works really well. I do have a twin needle, but I just didn't want to waste your time switching between the two. But if you've got a twin needle, you can use that. So with a top stitch for zigzag, you can make your zigzag width and length even. So 2 width, 2 length, or 2.5 width and 2.5 length. So it just depends on what you like. So you can test it on a little piece of scrap fabric and decide what look you like. So I usually go with 2 and 2. So zigzag, and I'm going to go 2 width and 2 length. And I'm going to, you could pin it down if you want, like pin the seam allowance down to the bodice. So we're trying to, if you imagine we're trying to sew the seam allowance to the bodice. So you can pin it. I'm just going to use my fingers to feel for it. And I'm going to start again. I'm going to start at the centre back. I'll find my centre back there. And you stitch. So the stitching is just about 2 millimeters, or 1 or 2 millimeters away from your stitching line on your neck. So where the band attaches to the bodice, top stitch about 1 or 2 millimeters away from there. So it's just catching that seam allowance. All right, so here we go. I might have gone, oh, I haven't gone long enough, 2.5, there we go. Start that one again. So just doing this little zigzag. No, it's not doing zigzag. It's doing I was doing a 3-step zigzag there. Whoops. This is a new machine. And my old machine's at the studio. Number 5 is zigzag. Number 5 on here is triple stitch. So I was just triple stitching there for a while. That's okay. I was wondering why it was taking so long. Let me have a look. Ah, it's okay. No one will notice. All right. And again, you can see I'm just pulling the fabric out of the way all the time. So constantly just straightening and flattening the fabric. Try not to stretch too much when you're sewing, like stretch, you don't want to be stretching the fabric as you're sewing. Let the feed dogs just take it. Also, I forgot to mention, I've taken, I might even take a little bit more off, some pressure off my presser foot at the tension area. So normally it's about 4. For my stretch, I'm using about 2. If you find that it's not feeding through, you know, like smoothly, you can take some tension off there. You can also use a walking foot. Okay. And also, because I'm in lockdown, I don't have a matching thread. I've got a light grey, which isn't very nice, but that's okay. No one will ever know it wasn't supposed to be there. I'm just going to go over the top of that triple stitch. There we go. No one will notice. And then cut that off. One good thing I like about this new machine, it has the little automatic cutting off the thread option, which is really good. I've still got a few threads left over there from my basting, I think. All right, so I have top stitched that down. So I just want to show you. So if you can see, I don't know if you can see. There we go. That's all top stitched. All right. So now we've done that, I think we're up to our sleeve. Yeah, excellent. You can give that a nice little press too. It's always good to press your stitches after. It sets them in nicely. But I just want to move on to the sleeve. Okay, so with the sleeve, we're going to be gathering it. So grab out one sleeve. We might only get through one sleeve today, but that's okay. I'd love to get this step done for you. So hopefully you've notched your sleeve. So there's a few notches. A double notch always indicates the back. So the back of a sleeve or the back of a bodice, the back of a pant. Wherever you see a double notch, that indicates the back of it, something. So here I can see the back there. But there's also other notches, and I'm just trying to find them there. There we go. And those 2 little notches above the double notch and the single notch are your gathering notches. So that's where you're going to gather from and to. Okay, so the double notch and the single notch is for matching in the bodice, but the 2 single notches above there are the gathering points. So I'm just going to pop a little pin there and there because my notches I can't quite see. They're tiny. All right. Now, with gathering, it's a good idea to change your thread to a contrast colour. I might just quickly change that actually to pink or something like that. And it's a good way of using up old bobbins. So if you've got a little bobbin that has a yucky colour on it that you probably never use ever again, you can use that up in your gathering because we're going to be pulling the gathering stitches out. Plus, if you use a contrast stitch, you can easily see those stitches, so it's easy to pull them out. If you use the same thread as you're sewing with, number one, it's a waste. You might run out of thread and you're going to, you know, pay whatever it is for this nice thread that you bought. So just use cheap thread, horrible colours that you never want to use again. I'm using baby pink though, I use that all the time, but that's what I've got, so I'm going to go with that. All right, now the gathering thread, I don't want it to be short to start. I want a long tail to start with. So I'll make sure I've got a long tail of my bobbin thread there and my top thread. So the gathering, we put it back on straight stitch and the longest stitch you've got on your machine. And you're going to run 2 rows of gathering stitches within the seam allowance. So the seam allowance is 1 centimetre. So run some gathering stitches, you know, maybe at about 8 millimetres, and the next row of gathering stitches a few millimetres away from that. All right, don't back stitch with your gathering stitches. Oh, I better put that back on so I can put my pins in. So just shy of the 1 centimetre seam allowance, that's where we're gathering. All right, don't back stitch. And just run those stitches from notch to notch in the sleeve head. Now, you can also gather, there's another way, and I've put it in the instructions, using dental floss, believe it or not. So you zigzag, you run your floss underneath the zigzag stitches, and then you pull the floss up at the end, and it actually works really, really well. But I always find it takes up a lot of floss, and I like to floss my teeth. So I like to use it for my teeth. I like to save it for my teeth, that's what I'm trying to say. All right, there's one row of gathering stitches. Now I'm going to run another row just inside of that. So maybe at about 6 millimeters this time. Oops. There we go. And I'll take that out, and remember not to cut that thread off too short. You want to keep it a little longer. Okay, just tidy up a little bit here. Things are getting a bit out of control. All right. So now you grab your bodice and you work out which sleeve is going where. So remember I said the double notch goes to the back. So I've got a double notch on this side. Yeah. So I'm going to find the double notch that matches. So open out your bodice like this. Okay. And I've got sides together. I'll find my double notch again. Just lost it. Where is it? Had it there a second ago. That's a single notch. There's my double notch. Okay, so I'm on the right side. That's the back there. Yeah, I'm on the right side. So there's my double notch there. So right sides together, double notches matching. So start at that point and pin that together. And again, with my sleeve, I like to pin perpendicular. I don't know, it's easier sewing for me for some reason. Then match your single notches. That's where your gathering started. Then go around to the side seam and match that point there. And then you're just going to bring those raw edges together and pin through there. Lots of pins too. Then you're going to match your shoulder seam. So there's a notch, hopefully you've notched your shoulder notch in your sleeve. So the notch at the sleeve will match your shoulder seam. So pin that together there. Now you're going to have this huge amount here. That's fine. That's what we're going to gather. But continue going around to the front side as well. Okay. So I'm going to match my, once I get untangled here, my notches over here. So I've got two single notches. There's one where the gathering started and stopped, which is there. And then there's a notch, another single notch lower down. You'll match that as well. Now, this can get a little bit messy with all these threads, but just bear with it. And then the side seam. So then go and pin all that together there. So from the underarm point, the side seam, you can pin right up to the notch. That all should sit nice and flat. There's no gathering there, so that should be nice and easy matching that. But then you've got these two huge sort of leftover bits here. You see that? That we need to gather. So to gather those, let's sit down, grab the bobbin threads. So grab two bobbin threads and then just gently start pulling on them. So we need to gather this so it fits in between the shoulder seam and the notch, or where you've started gathering. Okay. So this can take some time, but just bear with it. Like I said, sewing takes a lot of patience. Now, because French terry, this gathers really nicely. I'm using a brush fleece, a soft brush fleece. Excuse me, because we're in lockdown here in Melbourne and I'm just using whatever I had available. The brush fleece, I can tell you now, I'm doing it right now, is a little bit harder to gather. It's feeling like my gathering stitches want to break, so you've got to be very careful just to gently gather that up. There's lots of gathering in this sleeve, as you can see. Now, I did say at the beginning, if you want less gathering, you just need to adjust your pattern piece. So you would slash it down through the sleeve head and just overlap the pieces. There we go, that's fitting now. So you can see I've just gathered that up. That's one side done. And then I use my pins again, perpendicular. Perpendicular helps keep those gathers flat, or not flat, you don't want them flat, but you don't want them doing all weird wonky things. Okay, so just easing all that in there to fit and really bringing those edges together, the raw edges together to meet. Okay, I can't believe how fast the time's gone. It's 56 minutes gone already. That's okay. We'll get this sleeve done and we'll come back next week to finish it off. If we can get one sleeve done here, you can do one sleeve in the meantime until next week, and then we can finish it off. So now I'm just gathering the other side. If you've got nicer fabric than this, I mean, this is nice fabric. I got it from Wattle Hill Fabric in Queensland. They've got beautiful fabrics, but it's the brush fleece that is not liking the gathering so much. It will be fine once it's done, but it's a little bit trickier than the other stuff, the French terry. Okay, almost there. So once it's gathered and it's going to fit, yep, that's going to fit. And if you've gathered too much, that's fine. You just pull it out a little bit. I actually prefer sometimes to gather it too much to start with and then pull it out because your gathers tend to be a lot more even. So yeah, you want your gathers nice and even. You don't want, one area all gathered up and then another little area with not so many gathers. It looks not so good. There we go. Okay, pin that in place. Once you've got that pinned in place, we're going to baste all of this again with a long basting stitch. Okay, yep, so that's good. So mine's all done. So I've attached the sleeve, gathered it up, and I'm going to use that long basting stitch again and my 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I've still got my contrast thread in there because I want to pull that out later on. So just shy of the 1 centimetre again, and I'm just going to stitch that in place now. Now, when you're stitching over the gathers, you can use an awl, or I haven't got an awl here today, but I've got a chopstick. I'll show you in a second, just to help really keep those gathers in place. So I'll get those threads out of the way there. So I'm up to my gathers now. So sometimes I just grab, I've got a little chopstick here, and I use the chopstick instead of my finger. And I can tell you, I had a girl in my class a few months ago. It was very distressing. She was gathering and sewed her finger. So the needle went straight in, straight out. And I think it's because she was trying to do this, what I'm doing with my chopstick. I'm using the chopstick to sort of try and flatten the gathers to feed through, and her finger has just got caught underneath. It was terrible, very distressing. But she was okay. So that's the good news. All right. So you can see the chopstick's really coming in handy. Just really helping to control the the gathering. Okay. The rain is really coming down out there. It's a great day for sewing. Almost to the end of that gathering section, and then it's pretty straightforward sewing from there, so I can get rid of my chopstick now. There we go. And again, you don't have to backstitch, this is just basting, so you can just take it straight out. Okay, so I've basted the sleeve in. So now what I do is go and have a look at it. There's so much stuff here at the moment. There we go. And make sure from the right side, so have a look at it from the right side, that the gathers look good and there's no weird puckery things happening. So that is actually looking pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Very, very nice. Okay. So now that I'm happy with it, I can go and stitch it in properly. So you can either stitch it on your regular sewing machine, change the thread back to your thread colour, and then use your zigzag stitch again, or you can overlock it like I'm going to do. I'm just getting rid of a few of these threads. I might actually get rid of my basting threads there because they're getting in the way. Not my basting, sorry, my gathering. Don't get rid of your basting, otherwise it'll come undone. I'm just getting rid of my gathering threads. The overlocker will chop a lot of this off anyway, so it doesn't really matter so much, but there's a lot of threads hanging around. That's what you'll find with gathering, that you'll just have threads everywhere. So it's probably a good idea just to get rid of them so that they don't get in your way. There we go. Those ones straight on the floor. All right, so I'm going to overlock that now. 1 centimetre seam allowance. Start that one again. There we go. Just didn't want to grab onto it. There we go. Got it going. Now I'm sewing on my overlocker with the gathering facing up because I want to make sure that I'm not doing some, bunching up of the gathers. If it was underneath, I wouldn't be able to see really what's going on there. Now it's quite thick here, and the overlocker's telling me it doesn't like it very much, so just go slow. Got through that. All done. And now, if you can, get rid of any of those basting threads. So that's why it's good to have the contrast colour, so you can just pull it out. Some of it might have got caught in the overlocker, but that's okay. If you've got time, you can just go and pick all that out. Now, we've just gone over the hour. I'll just keep going a little bit because I'd like to get this sleeve done to this point, and then we'll come back next week, if that's okay with you. Joel and Jessica, I'm not really sure who I'm talking to there. Joel or Jessica? Okay. Yep, that's good enough. There's one more little thread. You can really get caught up in this, so I'll do that at a later date, take those threads out. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do, we are now up to sewing. So you will do the other sleeve, but I'm not going to do that today. The next step, after you've got both of the sleeves in, is then to sew the side seam together. So actually I won't do this because it might make it hard for me to sew. Oh no, that should be okay. Yeah, so we'll do this and then I'll come back to the other sleeve. So, or should I not? Actually, now I'm doubting myself. I'm thinking, no, I won't, because I don't want you to go and do that and then it makes it hard for you. So I was going to sew down here to show you how to do it, but I'd rather you put the other sleeve in first and then we'll do that. So if you're coming back next week, and we can do it next week on Wednesday, but it will be a little bit later because I think we're getting out of lockdown. So I have a class that goes to 1 o'clock. So it'll be about 2 o'clock on Wednesday. And we will put in the other sleeve, or if you've put it in already, we sew up the side seams. Then we have to put in the rib banding on the lower sleeve and the rib banding on the hem. So I think we can leave that there today and come back to that. So if you've got any questions, make sure you put it in the comments. And yeah, we'll do the rest of it next week. But it's actually looking pretty good so far. I'll just pop it over the top of this sweater that I've got on already. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. There we go. It's really hard to see this dark colour, isn't it? Yeah, that sleeve is looking great. I mean, that is over the top of this sleeve too, so it's puffing it out a little bit more, but I think that's going to look great. So by coming back next week, it will give you a little time to refine some things if you need a neckband or, you know, if you've fallen a little bit behind. So thanks for coming along, everybody, and I'll see you next week to finish this Soho sweater off. And have a great week. I hope if you're in Melbourne, you get back to life as normal. All right, guys, see you later. Bye.